Welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
It's the Arbon Textiles mill tour. For those of you who don't know us, we are a worsted mill based in Devon, and we use all this lovely vintage machinery to create crafting yarn, so knitting and crochet, and then we also make tops for hand spinners. And today we're going to show you exactly how we do that. So I've got Laura with me, and then I've also got Martha, two of our trusty mill folks. If you were to come for a tour, it would be these two doing the tour, so they're absolute pros. Know far more about the machines than I do. And what we're going to do today is we're going to show you exactly how we turn
This greasy fleece that we buy locally from the wool board.
And all of our fleece these days, we have full traceability on it. We get it from local sheep.
Yeah.
And then, it goes up to Bradford and it gets processed into tops like this. Sometimes they're dyed. This is a white one. And after that, it comes into this building, and Martha's going to show you what happens.
We make it into tops and then we spin it into yarn.
So before we get stuck in, I'll just let Laura and Martha introduce exactly which bit of the process they'll be talking about, and then we'll show you the machines.
Yeah. So I'm going to explain how we go from the plain tops that arrive back to us from Bradford through the blending process and spinning to get to a single ply. Then I'll hand over to Martha.
And then I will show you how we take all the single plies spun downstairs and how we finish them upstairs to create your final skein of yarn.
So without further ado, let's get stuck in.
Woo! So here we are with our first machine. All our vintage machines, we call them by human names because they have really lovely characters. This one is Ralph, and he's a Gillbox. And he's my favourite, but don't tell the other machines. So before we get started on Ralph, we're actually going to thread up the colours. So we start at the back with the 6 different bumps of colour at the back of the machine, and we thread them up through the loop and round the roller and towards the back of the machine. And I get all these 6 different ends at the back of the machine. Here we're making the first blend, what's called a first gill, of Knit by Numbers raspberry, number 1 to 8. You can see it's a mixture of pink, black and red. As it goes into the machine, we put these rollers down onto the fibre. This just controls the tension of it as it goes in. And we carefully inch it forwards and catch the fibre as it pops out the front of the machine. We take a long bit, give it a little twist, and then just get it nice and neat down into the coiler. When it's happy, we put this bar in, which again is just helping to control the tension of the fibre. And while it's running, it makes this lovely ice cream swirl of fibre as the can and the coiler are both turning around. So here at the front of the machine, the pink, black and red that we started off with at the back came out at the front, and they're blended together. So how did that happen? The Gillbox is actually doing 3 things at the same time for us. It's blending those colours together. It can also blend different fibres together. Importantly, it's drafting the fibre out, which means teasing the fibres past each other. So we're going from a thick stream of fibre at the back to a thin one at the front. And it's also straightening out the fibres, so making sure they're all really nice and parallel, which is really great for spinning, part of what makes us a worsted spinning mill, and it makes your yarn really smooth and soft and lovely. It does that by a couple of things that are happening inside there. First, you've got a back pressure roller that's pulling in those fibres from the back, and you've got a front pressure roller that's pulling them forwards out the front of the machine. That front one is going much faster than the back one, and this means we're going from a thick fibre to thin. For example, at the moment I've got 96 grams per metre coming in the back, and it's coming out as one, which is just 16 grams per metre. So we've really reduced it down. And to do that, it's running through this thing. These are called faller bars. It's like a really gnarly steel comb. I've tried to count them, and I think there's something like 80 of these in the machine, top and bottom, and they run through the fibre really, really fast. And that is straightening out those fibres and blending them together. Ralph's teeth, we call them, are quite chunky and quite widely spaced, but we've got another Gillbox. He's called Cuthbert, and Phil runs him. And he's got much finer teeth, and they're much closer spaced. You can really see the difference if I put them next to each other. And that means that Cuthbert can deal with our more tricky fibres. For us, that is silk, nylon, and alpaca. So it creates a more intimate blend between those fibres and our wool fibres. It does make Cuthbert a trickier customer though. Here's Phil running Cuthbert. He's doing a second gill. As we do each gill, the tops get smoother and softer and the colours blend further, ready for spinning. We gill the tops 2 to 4 times depending on what it's being made into. So from here, we've got 2 choices of how we spin our yarn. We've got 2 different spinners. So most of the fibre that comes off Ralph is going through one system to our smaller spinner Butler, and most of the fibre that comes off Cuthbert, that goes through another system onto our bigger spinner Kevin, who you'll see later on. So from here, we have to go through a couple of machines before we get to the spinner. The first one is Drucilla. Come with me to see her working. So here we are at our next machine. This is Drucilla. Her proper title is an auto-levelling Drawbox, but we call her Drucilla. She's one of the few female machines in the mill. She takes those tops that we made on Ralph, those nice blended raspberry, and takes it down and makes it into a heavy roving. It goes in and under the first roller, which draws the fibre in slowly. It slots into an ambler in the middle. This just helps control the draft by keeping a little bit of pressure on it. And then at the front, I can inch it carefully forwards under the big roller at the front. This one's going much faster than the back one, so it's drafting out the fibre from a thick stream again down to a thin stream. And this is now what we call a heavy roving. I give it a little bit of twist by hand and then feed it into the metal flyer arm. The flyer arm goes around and around the bobbin, and it delivers the roving onto the bobbin and is also putting that bit of twist into it. This bit of twist is not part of the spinning process, but it just allows us to handle the fibre and feed it onto the bobbin. We set a counter so the bobbins fill up the right amount, and off it goes. The lifter plates go smoothly up and down while it's running, so that the bobbin fills all the way to the top and all the way to the bottom. When it's finished, you just undo that little bit of twist in the roving, break it, and then tie it onto the bobbin, ready for the next process. here we are at our next machine. We're always getting the fibre ready for the next machine. So here's those yellow bobbins of raspberry that we've just seen being made on Drucilla, and they've come to this next machine. He's called James Henry, and he's a roving frame. So he deals with rovings, which is what these lovely sort of thick, slightly twisted streams are. So here you can see Phil running James Henry. He's threading up the fibre. You thread it up by taking pairs of rovings through the hooks, over and behind the back rollers, and then it goes under two beautiful wooden amblers, one of my favourite bits of the mill. These amblers just help to control the fibre as it's being drafted, and then it goes under the big pressure roller at the front, which is going much faster than the one at the back like before. We've now got a much thinner roving. We give it a little bit of a twist by hand to start it off. And just like before, feed it on to the bobbin. Check that everything's running okay. And set the counter so the bobbins fill correctly. And off it goes. The job of James Henry is to draft the roving out a little bit further and put that twist back in it. Again, that twist is not part of the spinning process. When the machine stops, we wind this lovely handle to open up the carriage. We can take off the full bobbins and put on new empty ones for the next cycle. This is called doffing. And from here, we're finally ready to spin our yarn. So finally we're ready to spin. We've got those green bobbins of raspberry that we made on the other machines, and we're just getting ready to spin them. This is our smaller spinning machine. It's a ring spinner called Butler, named after his previous owner, and he's about 55 I think now. Getting on, but a really trusty machine. There used to be hundreds of these in Yorkshire, and now this is possibly the last one in the world, so we take good care of him. What he does is he takes this roving that we've made and it runs through a set of rollers, much like we've seen before. So you have a slower first roller and then a faster final roller. So it's drafting out between those two rollers. In the middle, again, we've got a little ambler that just controls the draft by keeping a tiny bit of pressure on the roving. And then when it pops out the second roller, we insert twist into it and it becomes a single ply. And it fills up the tube slightly differently to what we've seen before. So this lifter plate slowly moves up and down, but instead of going all the way up and all the way down, it starts near the bottom and goes up and down within a small range and then works its way up the tube. So you get a nice even fill, but that allows it to be pulled off later on the next machine. We set the gears specially on this so that we get it just right. So if we set the gears correctly, we can make our single ply exactly the right thickness. And that's how we know that your 100 gram skein of yarn is exactly the right length of yarn. This gear that I'm changing affects the speed of the final roller. So this controls the amount of drafting and thus how thick the single ply will be. For example, this is a single 8. That means if I had a kilogram of this, and you ran away with one end and I held on to it, you would get 8 kilometres away. So that's how we measure the thickness of our yarn. To put that in perspective, the thickest one we do is a single 5, and with that you would only go 5 kilometres, but the thinnest one we do is a single 12, and that time your same kilogram of single ply would go 12 kilometres away. So we start off with a leader on a tube. If you're a hand spinner, you know about leaders. So this basically tells the fibre which way to go when it comes out that second roller, and it winds onto this tube which is spinning at speed. Here we can hold all 12 leaders all at once and then individually lift them up between those 2 final rollers, catching the fibre as it exits. As it comes down onto the tube, twist is inserted because of the speed of the tube and the little traveller that's winding around really fast and delivering it onto the tube. This will take about 2 hours to fill one of these tubes, and we've got 2 different sides on Butler. This makes him really useful because we can actually do completely different things, different colours, different fibres, different twists on each side at the same time. So he's a really great machine. So that's how we spin on this machine, but let's go see how we get from the tops onto our other spinning machine, Kevin. This is Kevin. He's the biggest machine in the mill, and he's a sliver spinner. Kevin is about 40 years old, and he's the only machine who came to us effectively pre-named. On the inside of a dusty glass panel, the name Kevin is crudely scrawled, as if someone was once trapped inside the machine. This might be the origin of our mill ghost. Kevin's a bit different to Butler. He works from a sliver, which is a thin top, and then drafts it down and spins it straight into a single ply. We don't need those machines in the middle like for Butler. And today we are spinning Harvest Hues. This is a colour called Juniper. And on our Gillbox you can see Sophie preparing a different colour. This is Woad. So the colour goes through one more Gillbox, this is A2D2, to prepare it for this machine, because we need to thin it down using those 2 different heads on A2D2. So this thin sliver you can see coming over the top of the machine. And Sophie's threading it over the rollers at the back that feed it into the machine. Here's Rebecca threading up one of the heads. She takes the sliver off the back of the machine and threads it in under the first roller and lowers the first pressure lever. This first roller is going slowly. It comes through over this little belt, and then she lowers the second pressure lever onto it. This is going a bit faster and creates our first draft zone on the machine. It then disappears inside this sort of green box that we call a carriage. This is where the drafting magic happens. So it comes out the front here and it's sucked away. This just controls the fibre while we get the leader ready. You can see Rebecca stopping the spindle with the brake, putting the tube on, and then using the leader in the guide and then in the traveller, and then releasing the brake and catching the leader in that roller, which grabs onto that fibre stream as it's exiting. It doesn't go into the suction anymore, and it starts spinning. It takes a whole mill to start Kevin running. It's quite a big procedure, and you have to do it live, so with the machine all running. So you can see here we're all lined up along the machine and threading up all those ends. As the machine runs, the big lifter plates that run the whole length of the machine slowly go up and down so they evenly fill our tube. This is a time lapse. It actually takes 2 hours to fill the whole tube, but we've speeded it up for you because it's a bit boring to watch the whole thing. Once the machine fills the tubes, it stops itself, lowers the lifter plates, and we come along and take all those tubes off. Here's Rebecca removing the filled ones and replacing them with empty ones, ready for the next cycle. Before we make any wool, we always test it to make sure we're making it just right. We check that the colour is right, we check that the twist is right, and we also check that the thickness is right. So we'll set up the gears for what we know is going to be just almost right, and we'll run a little tester for 10 minutes, and we cone that off. We run it round a wrap wheel, which is a very specific distance, it's 80 yards. And we do some little complicated maths, which I won't bore you with, but allows us to weigh that and compare it with the distance, and it tells us how thick the yarn is. If it's a little bit wrong, we'll adjust those gears, maybe change one gear for the next one up or the next one down, and then we know we're actually spinning it to the exactly right thickness to make your skeins just right. So that's the end of my part of the process in the downstairs of the mill. Let's go find Martha for the upstairs bit of the mill. Here she is. Hello.
Hello.
We've finished the downstairs part of the mill tour. We've made our single ply. Now it's over to you for finishing.
Let's follow it upstairs then.
Hey.
So this is Gino, he's our cone winder. He is one of the more modern machines in the mill. Everything that gets spun downstairs travels upstairs here, and we put it onto Gino so that we can cone it into lovely cones ready to go on Boyd. The tubes go on the bottom here and they get threaded up through the eye. It then goes round the tension rings, and depending on what type of yarn we have, depends on how much tension we put onto those rings. It then gets threaded up through the eyes in the middle, round another tension roller, up past the bar, and then we put the end of the yarn into the cone, wind it on a little bit so it knows where to go, and then we can press the start button and it will start to cone. All of the singles are coned onto however big cones we need to fill up Boyd, which is our next machine. If we need to join anything, either singles or folded yarn, for example, if a tube or bobbin runs out and we need to join the next piece in, we use a splicer. What the splicer does is it blows compressed air between the two bits of yarn. This then compresses them together and creates a perfect bit of yarn again, so that you don't have knots or ties in your yarn. We do this by threading one piece of yarn under and over, and the other one goes the opposite way to create a crisscross, and then we press the lever, and this is splicing. In addition to Gino, we also have another cone winder downstairs called Rupert Lee. He has slub catchers on him, which is the difference between the two cone winders. And he deals with mostly the tubes of Kevin. Next, we'll go from the cone winders to Boyd, our folding machine. So this is Boyd. He is one of the oldest machines upstairs. He is probably from about the 1960s. He's a very cantankerous fella. We have a lot of trouble with him. However, he is good fun. Boyd is a folding machine, which is also the same as Plying. We take 3 of the singles we spun downstairs and twist them together in the opposite direction to how they were spun to form our plied yarn. So here Daisy's got knit by numbers, which happens to have 3 plies. However, we can use 2, 3 or 4 plies to make different thicknesses of yarn. Daisy's putting the cones that we've coned on Gino onto the top. They then get threaded through the tension eyes at the top. They then come through the rings and through the pins, then through another eye, round a tension roller, through a couple more eyes, and then they get wound onto the bobbin through the traveller. So let's see him in action. Everything upstairs twists the opposite way to downstairs so that we can get a perfectly balanced yarn for your end skein. Once we have folded everything on board, we have full bobbins and they get transferred back to Gino so that we can cone them for storage and so that we can skein them on Gillian. So everything is threaded in exactly the same way, but if we require a specific weight for a cone, we have a counter on Gino which allows us to change every single head if we'd like, and means that we can get, say, a kilo cone, so we know exactly how much yarn is going onto the cone. And then once they've done this, they go into storage or they go to Gillian, which is our next machine. This is Gillian, our skein winder. Her metalwork dates back to about 1910. However, we have modernised her over the years slightly. She produces all the skeins that you order from us. Here we've got Harvest Hues worsted. We can do a total of 40 skeins at a time. However, you can see I've only got 20 cones on here at the moment. So here with Gillian, you can expand and contract her arms. We put the 2 ties on either end just to secure her as she's spinning. And then we thread up the yarn through the pigtail eye and then around the beams all the way along until we've got our 20 or 40 skeins attached. We then set the counter and then press go, and she will do her mesmerising spin. Once she's stopped spinning, we pull her back to the beginning, and then we can cut all of those ties, and then we'll do a tie on the front, securing those 2 loose pieces of yarn. Then we can collapse her completely, taking off our 2 ties at the end, and that's when we shimmy all the yarn down the other end of the machine towards the crank. So we just lay the yarn in the gap, pull that crank around, and then it releases the yarn. We also have a mini skein winder called Piglet. She works very much the same way as Gillian. Here you can see Donna operating her and making lots of mini skeins. However, you can make Piglet bigger and smaller, so we can do both mini skeins and big skeins on there, but we mostly use her for mini skeins. And the final step of the process doesn't require machines, it requires people. So I'm going to invite Sonia and Laura back in so that we can twiddle the final skeins of yarn.
Oh, it's a race.
It's an arm workout.
It is.
My fingers so stuck in it.
Martha wins.
Martha always wins. There we go.
There we go. Something like that.
So here we've got skeined yarn, and then the last little bit is we pop a label on. So, and then it's all ready for you at home.
Yay.
Thanks so much for watching, and thanks so much to Martha and Laura for showing everyone round. We really hope you've enjoyed kind of learning a little bit more about exactly how we make those skeins you use at home. And if you'd like to come and have a little look and see all the machines in person, and Martha and Laura, do feel free to come to an open weekend. They're always in June, and we kind of give all the machines a little polish, open the roller shutter doors, and invite you all inside. It's a really lovely thing. So it's always the first weekend in June, if you'd like to join us. And other than that, I think we just need to say thanks. Have a cup of tea.
Oh, yeah. Well needed.
Thanks so much for watching.
Bye.